It has been precisely 1 month's time since my last podcast, which was the Mariners didn't sign Juan Soto podcast. And then I took a little bit of a break. I took a holiday break, didn't really have a reason to put out a podcast before the holidays. I was out of town for the holidays. And then afterwards, there's been New Year's. There haven't been much going on with the Mariners. And so I just took a little break. And fully expecting to record a podcast around this time, thinking that the Mariners might give me a transaction to talk about. And as much as Tyler J and Hagen Danner seem like interesting spring training relief pitcher invites, I don't have much to talk about for them. It's been a month, and I think heading into the end of my last episode, I believe I said, oh yes, and maybe I'll see you in 2025, and the Mariners might have transacted and improved their roster in a meaningful way. And why did I think that? Maybe I didn't. I don't think I think they're going to do anything. I just think it was wishful thinking that I wanted them to do something. There have been a lot of transactions since then. Like, it's the pace of which this offseason is moving has actually been quite nice. There have been peaks and valleys, I'd say, of the transacting, but largely there's been a lot of consistent movement in the free agent market. And December, there were a couple of very large trades that happened too. It's been a little quieter the past week, I'd say. I think a lot of stuff got done before Christmas and then before New Year's. And some stuff has happened in like the first week of the year, but nothing like super, super significant. With each transaction, I die a little bit inside, I think. The Mariners are still sitting in literally the exact same spot they were at the start of the offseason, basically. They've done nothing. They haven't signed anyone. They haven't made any trades. They've just claimed a few relief pitchers for the pile, which is fine. Absolutely. They're obviously going to do that. And I get arbitration happened. I already spoke about arbitration, and that has come and passed. And it's funny looking at their payroll last year was like 145-ish million, and now it's sitting roughly in the same spot after arbitration. So they're basically paying the same thing, which is upsetting because arbitration obviously was going to get them to that point, and they should be spending more money than that, but they're simply not. So it looks like they've done nothing. It's because they have done nothing. They just, their payroll, the only reason it's increased since the offseason started is because you have guys like Cal Raleigh and Logan Gilbert and George Kirby entering arbitration. I paid Randy in arbitration as well, and a couple of relief pitchers, but those were the big ones. And those guys are already expensive for the Mariners. Those are expensive contracts, like between like 4.5 to what's Randy's 13 million-ish. That's huge money. That's big money for these poor Seattle Mariners. Like I said, every transaction that has happened since then, maybe not everyone, but a lot of them have just made me a lot angrier. I think it's somewhat of a problem with expectations. The expectations were quite low heading into this offseason, but there's always a shred of optimism in my brain. And I think that stems from me thinking I'm running the team. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I would totally do that. They can totally do that. They have the means, but they just never end up doing it. It's a different offseason. It's completely different from last season. Last offseason, it was a lot of moves to get to not a significantly better roster. For a lot of those moves, it was the trading away useful players like I've talked about for a salary dump to get little in return. And even despite that, despite all of the moving mountains to move an inch stuff, nonsense, really, that the team did last offseason. They still got to a place where I was fairly optimistic heading into the year that they had improved the roster. Like, at the end of the day, all of those moves netted out to Luis Urias, which I wasn't high on, and that was correct. But then Jorge Polanco and Mitch Garver. And the way they got to those moves was very questionable, sure. However, I liked those additions to the team. And I think most people agreed, hey, this team looks like it's going to be better than 2023. Those additions alone looked like they would move the needle a little bit offensively. And then that just didn't happen. And everyone was wrong, as most people are sometimes when you're optimistic about a hitter coming to Seattle. I mean, everyone knows it, but this offseason, it's just been literally nothing, and they've been sitting on their hands. And for the first month, I would say the first 6 weeks of the offseason, I was not in support of this. Like, obviously, I'd be more in support of them being involved with Juan Soto. Or, I don't know, who else? Willy Adames, sure. Like, I don't know. And then, as more time has gone on, because I was basically thinking Jerry didn't make a trade. He's not really setting the trade market. I kind of like them feeling out the free agency and trade market more and then pouncing, like holding on to their resources, of which they have many, and they still have many, and I'll get to that. And seeing what the trade and free agency markets look like, and then pouncing. Maybe in the winter meetings, no. Maybe right in the start of January, no. They haven't done anything, and I feel like they've now waited so long that it has to be trades. I don't think you can ever wait too long for trades before the season, to be honest, because once pitchers and catchers report and spring training starts, there will be injuries. Teams will make trades at that time. But free agency-wise, if there was any shred of hope they were going to spend significantly on free agents, it's gone. All of the ones that I would have wanted to sign are basically not available anymore. The ones left is just, it's either slop or too expensive for this broke ass franchise. So now I'm in a spot where I don't even really know what to talk about from a Mariners perspective. So I'm vamping. Every transaction that has happened since I last podcasted, I'm going to read it out, every major one. The day I released the last podcast on December 13th, that was the day the Cubs traded for Kyle Tucker and the Yankees traded for Devin Williams, both of which, that didn't really affect me too much. Yankees trading for Devin Williams makes a ton of sense, makes them better. The Cubs one was super surprising. Obviously, I've always been a big supporter of Kyle Tucker. I've always been one of those people who said he's just really good, and most people don't talk about it because he's boring. And then he put up 5 WAR in half a season last year, and everyone's like, okay, this guy is really good. Genuinely a 5-tool player. Just very unassumingly a 5-tool player. The Cubs trading for him, love it for the Cubs. They need a player like that. For the Astros, it's a little curious, and it's really marks the end of an era for them. They still have Yordan and Altuve from years past, but it's dwindling. Their amount of the amount of players on this team that were on their 7 straight ALCS appearances, those teams. That one didn't affect me too much from a Mariners perspective, besides the Astros confused, but I see what they're doing. They got Isaac Paredes. He's going to hit 30 home runs in the Crawford boxes this year. And then we'll get to the first baseman signing they made shortly after this, a week after. And after that, it made sense what their plan was, and at least they do have a plan. So I'll say that. The next day, the A's acquired Jeffrey Springs from the Rays in a trade involving 7 players. The A's are doing stuff. They're spending money because they have to. A couple days later, the Yankees traded for Cody Bellinger. Again, I think I probably predicted this on the podcast. It was a slam dunk. Everyone kind of knew this was going to happen. Sure, makes sense. Max Kepler signs with the Phillies. He was definitely one that I hadn't talked about this offseason, but I thought the Mariners could potentially do because he was going to be cheap. He signed a 1-year, $10 million contract. He would be a premier bounce-back candidate for the team to make. Like if they're looking for a signing that's low cost and has a decent ceiling on it if he gets back to what he's done in the past, which is a big question mark. But they also could use another left-handed hitting outfielder besides Luke Raley, who's going to play a decent amount of first. But whatever, Max Kepler, he signed. Gio Urshela signed with the A's. Red Sox signed Patrick Sandoval. Sure. Then this one. These next couple days here from December 20th to December, let's say, 23rd, those 3 days here is when I was not having a good time. I was having a very bad time reading all of these signings that came in. December 20th, the Astros signed Christian Walker. One, this sucks because Christian Walker is a good player, and this makes you Astros better. And two, 3 years, $60 million is all it took to get a good first baseman, a very good first baseman. It's only 3 years, committing $20 million a year. I cannot tell you how mad I was when I read this contract. Like, you're either telling me the Mariners didn't want to sign him, which is dumb because he would make the team better, or they couldn't afford paying a guy like that $20 million a year and make the rest of the transactions they wanted to make this offseason and add more salary. It is insane to me that they can't sign a deal like that in a spot where you were so poised to win would just add $40 million more to the payroll this offseason. And that is fairly modest because their payroll is $140 million. They could go over 200 and they'd be fine. They should be sniffing 200, and they are closer to 100 million than 200 million at present. That made me so mad. I love Christian Walker. I mean, he's just been he's elite first base defense, first of all. Super stable, plays a lot, good power, good bat to ball skills, can get on base. Just a stable, boring, if anything, first baseman who I think is just going to be good immediately for the Astros. And it's a 3-year deal. If he's bad in year 2 and 3 and he's just really good next year, that's fine. I'm sure they'll take that, especially their Jose Abreu signing did not turn out great. And you know what also pissed me off is you look at this and you're like, oh, wow, the Mariners could never have done this if they were the Astros in the same situation. If the Mariners had paid Jose Abreu all that money, they would be playing him at first base in 2025 or DH. He would be on the roster still. You know what the Astros did? Because they're a serious baseball organization, they said, no. He's clearly not good enough. We don't care that we're paying him all that money. He's not going to be on the team. We're going to pay him to not be on the team, and then we're going to pay one of the better free agent first basemen available this offseason to come play for our ball club because we want to win, because we're serious. The Mariners would never, ever do that. We're seeing it right now with Mitch Haniger. They owe that guy $17 million next year. I've said the entire offseason, he doesn't belong on the roster. You pay him to leave, and either he gets picked up somewhere else or he's just not playing baseball anymore. You release him. Don't trade him. He's not worth giving up a prospect to get off the books. Maybe he is to the front office because they're so strapped for cash because of the ownership. But we're seeing it right now. Like, the Mariners should have been in on a right-handed hitting DH or outfielder earlier in this offseason potentially and just cut Mitch Haniger. Essentially what the Astros did here with Jose Abreu. And Christian Walker. Obviously, they traded Kyle Tucker, and they're not going to re-sign Bregman, which also, again, marks the end of an era. They got Paredes at third base now, Walker at first base. I don't think that's necessarily an upgrade from where they were at, but there's a plan, and they're spending. It's just pissed me off because it's a move I know the Mariners would not do because of their money restraints. And then, this was just day one of those 3 days where I wanted to claw my hair out. The next day, Paul Goldschmidt and the New York Yankees agree on a 1-year deal. This one didn't make me mad. I think Paul Goldschmidt is cooked. I think the Yankees are in a very, very precarious spot right now with their entire team, really. They've definitely spent money this offseason. Like, I like Max Fried. Cody Bellinger makes sense for them. I like Devin Williams. They lost Juan Soto, and that's an L of an offseason for me no matter what you do after that. So, whatever. Paul Goldschmidt, sure. But then, same day, the Cleveland Guardians traded first baseman Josh Naylor to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and then subsequently re-signed Carlos Santana to a 1-year, $12 million contract. There goes a big name off the board. Two big names off the board. Josh Naylor, I would have liked him in a Mariners uniform. He would have helped. He would have helped the team. Lefty bat. He can DH. He can play first base. He can sock dingers. Seems like a fun dude. Nope. Diamondbacks. And then Carlos Santana, who is seemingly the only guy the Mariners have really talked to about free agency this offseason. And the reporting came out, not the same day, but after this, that they had actually made him a 2-year offer. The offer, money and years-wise, was better by the Mariners than the Guardians, but Carlos Santana opted to go back to the Guardians because he loves Cleveland, which is fair. More power to him. Like, sometimes that's just how it goes. But the fact that this team, beat writers for this team, I forget who it was. I think it was Adam Jude. I don't think it was Divish. Reporting that the Mariners were so interested in signing a 39? I think he's 39. A 39-year-old first baseman to a 2-year deal. And they were so defeated that he chose a team he likes more to sign for less years. If that is what you're striving for, like, God, it's like the 54%. Like, that quote keeps hauntingly describing how this franchise operates. Shooting for Carlos Santana as your, like, main free agency option in an offseason full of first basemen, might I add, corner infielders, let's say, full of available corner infielders either through trade like Naylor or through free agency like Christian Walker and others. They try to really shoot. They really shot for the moon here and try to sign Carlos Santana to a 2-year deal and failed. It's like shooting for 54% and falling short. Like, please aim higher than this. They're not going to, but God, that was depressing to read. That was their aim. Just ridiculous. Just such an unserious ball club. Then the next day, the Nationals traded for Nathaniel Lowe from the Rangers. You know who else would have liked Nathaniel Lowe to play for their baseball team? Me. Nathaniel Lowe is currently better at playing first base than anyone else on this ball club. Luke Raley should be playing in the outfield. As much as I appreciate that he can play first base, and I think that's very useful, he should not be the first baseman on opening day. That diminishes Luke Raley's value. Part of his value is he can be more or less a full-time corner outfielder. You rest him against lefties sometimes, but he's going to hit against right-handed pitching and play corner outfield. And in a pinch, he can play first base. That's quite a valuable player. And he was that last year. He was a very valuable player. It worries me that he's penciled in as first baseman at the moment. So those 3 days, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first base options off the board. all of which the Mariners could have attained, only one of which they actually tried to get and failed in Carlos Santana. Just crazy. Just ridiculous. The Rangers, next day, they signed Jock Peterson, which I really like for them. I don't know if he was ever an option for the Mariners. I really doubt it, considering they have a roster spot with Mitch Haniger still. And you can't block Mitch Haniger, Austin. You can't block the Mitch Haniger, Austin Shenton DH platoon in 2025. What are you, crazy? You're going to sign a proven masher against right-handed pitching and Jock Peterson to play DH when you have those two guys platooning? Come on. God, it's just... Walker Buehler signed with the Red Sox. I'm reeling right now. Teoscar re-signed with the Dodgers, which is great. Love that for Teoscar. He seems super happy there. This seemed like a slam dunk. Good for them. Good for all parties involved. December 28th was a huge day for the Diamondbacks. Corbin Burns signs a $210 million deal with the Diamondbacks, 6 years, because he lives in Arizona. And this goes to show you that free agency is, like with the Carlos Santana thing, it's often not completely about the money. For a lot of people it is. For some it's not. And the Diamondbacks pounced on this pretty unique opportunity and did the thing, and they're better off for it. And go Diamondbacks, really. What else happened? Oh, yes. It was right around New Year's, and shortly after that, Hae-Sung Kim. I'm trying to say that correctly because it's not Hae-Sung. I think it's Hae-Sung. I digress. Rumors that he was going to sign. He had a deadline. He had to sign by the 3rd of January. So the couple days leading up to it, it was like, who's going to sign him? The favorites appeared to be the Dodgers, the main culprits. The Dodgers were involved. The Padres were involved. The Mariners were involved. I think a lot of other teams probably put out some feelers for him, but it seemed like those West Coast teams were the favorites to sign him. There was a potential Yankees in there as well. I'm sure they probably thought about or reached out to him after letting Glaber walk. But it felt like there was momentum for the West Coast. Mariners Twitter got familiar with his work. There was a lot of fun discourse that I love to silently observe on Mariners Twitter, which is whenever a main character gets selected, there's a decent portion of the fan base that is just like, no thanks. Doesn't seem that good. I'd rather they spend money elsewhere. I can't begin to ever think like that. Because what do you mean spend money elsewhere? You fool. They're not going to spend money elsewhere. What are you talking about? People need to start thinking more short term with baseball. I don't know. Does this player make your team better right now? Probably. Does he maybe not? Sure. But I feel like the probability that Hae-Sung Kim makes the Mariners better in 2025 is higher than he makes them worse. There's I think a lot of people do think about the opportunity cost of giving out money, which means you can't give out a certain amount to another potentially better player in their mind, which makes sense when the Mariners fans have been treated like we have, and we know there's a tight budget. However, let's just, try to sign a player first before, beggars can't be choosers. I think that's really my point here is a lot of people, same with Luis Arias. Luis Arias is paid a decent amount of money to do one really good thing, which is cool. I'll say that. He would make the 2025 Mariners a better team. It seems like the consensus on Mariners Twitter is that we don't want him and he's bad. He's not bad. He's quite limited as a player, sure. He's paid a decent amount of money, sure. But the question I always ask, would he make the Mariners a better team? And he absolutely would. You think the Mariners having a 300 batter in the lineup every day, taking a bunch of pitches, getting on base, do you think that's a bad thing? don't think about the money or the position. The Mariners aren't in a position to think about like positional fits. They're in a position right now to improve the team however they can. They have too many weak positions to think about positional versatility and all that. There's three. Oh man. There's three positions on this team. Not pitching. No pitchers involved in this. There's three positions on this team I think that are set in stone. I think it's center field. I think it's catcher with Julio and Cal. And then I think it is left field with Randy Arozarena. Right field, I'm fine with Victor Robles and Luke Raley. That is fine by me. However, that should not preclude them from signing another outfielder. That if the outfielder's better than Robles and Raley, which certainly could be in this hypothetical scenario, sign them. Sure. Yeah, I don't even think shortstop is. I don't even think J.P. Crawford is, in my opinion, written in pen on shortstop next year. He's going to be. They're not going to look at shortstop, but when I look at building a team that's better than this, those are the three positions that I think you do not need to improve upon. Mainly it's just center field and catcher. Every other position you can improve. And there are improvements available to you. So when you look at like Luis Arraez, who's not good defensively, you can stick him at first base. You can put him at DH. You can have him play a really bad second base. Either way, that would improve the lineup. That would make them a better hitting team. How much? That is a good debate. Would he improve the lineup, though? Yes, he literally would. So it's hilarious when the Mariners are always like, oh, they might do this. And everyone's like, no, that guy costs too much. What are you thinking, man? Like, what do you mean he might cost? Why are you worrying about that? Would he make the team better? That is where they're at. It's not like they have a glut of young position players coming up in next year. They literally do not. Cole Young probably will play in the major leagues, but all of the other guys are farther off than that from really making a difference on the squad. So you can't be looking and again, beggars can't be choosers. You can't be choosing positional fits right now. You just got to get good players on the team. And then he signed with the Dodgers. All of that to say he goes to the Dodgers. 3 years, I think $12 million a year. Pretty cool. Mariners definitely could have done that for him to play second base. Shortly after this, a couple days later, Gavin Lux was acquired by the Reds. Another potential, like, very interesting trade the Mariners could have made. I don't know where I stand on Gavin Lux, but again, I might like him at second base more than Ryan Bliss. Giants paid Justin Verlander for a year of services. That's fun. And then the most recent big signing was Jeff Hoffman. I almost said Trevor Hoffman. Nope. Jeff Hoffman to the Blue Jays. 3 years, $33 million. I think that is exactly the Bob Stevenson to the Angels deal they signed last season. So in my state of being right now, I've just been being rather silly on the internet recently, kind of laughing through the pain. I threw out the idea that they shouldn't even sign a bat at this point. They should roll out there with what they have offensively and just sign. This was before he signed, but sign Jeff Hoffman and Tanner Scott and just use their budget to make the bullpen awesome. And so you have like a 1 through 5 rotation of dogs, and then you just have a shutdown bullpen. Just like push the concept of this team to its absolute limits. They still could do it. Like sign Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates or something. Like just throw a bunch of money to improve the bullpen and not the offense and see what happens. You could build a really great team that way. Because you can talk yourself through all these scenarios. If they signed Pete Alonso, what could he do for the team? If they had signed Christian Walker, if they threw a bunch of money at Alex Bregman or something. All those unrealistic scenarios. I feel like it's just as realistic to say, hey, what if they signed Jeff Hoffman and Tanner Scott and didn't give up any runs? And then what if Julio hit his 99th percentile outcome and put up 8 WAR next year? They probably make the playoffs. But no, Jeff Hoffman is a Blue Jay, and that's where we're at. Those were all the major transactions, and now we're left with a team that, again, hasn't been improved upon. Not in the slightest. Let's read the roster resource for the Seattle Mariners in 2025, shall we? And this is going lineup 1 through 9, and then the 4 bench spots that they have on Fangraphs here. Victor Robles in right field, Julio Rodriguez in center field, Cal Raleigh at catcher, Randy Rosarena in left field, Luke Raley at first base. 1 through 5 against a right-handed pitcher. That is a solid 1 through 5. Could be better. Could be a lot worse, though. Could be a lot worse. You know that photo from The Simpsons, and it's Homer at the door, and the front of him looks normal, and then the back of him is like held together with clothespins? That is this 1 through 5, and then 6 through 9 of this lineup. Because after Luke Raley at 5, Fangraphs has Mitch Haniger at DH, J.P. Crawford at shortstop, Dylan Moore at third base, and Ryan Bliss at second base. That's ugly. That is so ugly. That is not a serious lineup. And the bench is Mitch Garver at catcher, Tyler Locklear, Austin Shenton, and Dominic Canzone. I would like to throw up looking at that. Genuinely. That's awful. It's just embarrassing, really. We're a decade in with Jerry Dipoto, and this is the lineup. Like, again, the pitching staff is great, man. I love the pitching staff. The bullpen, I'd say, stable. It's been just good. Flat out. But this is the lineup in year 10. A team that has never even made the World Series and just broke a 20-year-long drought. 2 years later, this is the lineup. I know the offseason's not over, but geez, God, it's so bad. It's just so bad. I threw out on the internet probably last week or something what this team needs, like the picture of that roster resource, and then what this lineup needs. And like acquisitions should ideally check like a lot of these boxes. Like one player should check like 2 or 3 of these, but they need in that lineup to really, for me to consider it a good lineup, one more all-star level bat. So I'd like an all-star level bat in my eyes is like Cal, Julio, and Randy. So like of the rest of the players available, like listen, Alex Bregman would be that. Pete Alonso would be that. You know, that type of bat. They're not going to get that at all, but that's what it needs. Realistically, this is the big one. 2 competent/proven MLB hitters. So, again, that could have been Christian Walker. Could have been Carlos Santana, even though he's old. Could have been Josh Naylor. Could be Alec Bohm. Honestly, Alec Bohm, I don't know if he's an all-star level hitter, but I think he's at least a pretty good one, and that would help. The lineup also needs another lefty. They need another lefty in here, and then they need a third baseman, a second baseman, a first baseman, and then another outfielder/DH. So all of those boxes, if they manage to do all that, which they won't, what would that accomplish? Well, I think the all-star level bat would decrease the reliance on Julio being like a 7-win player, which I think would be good for him and good for the team. And then even if they just got 2 other good hitters, it would still take the emphasis off of him. The more like competent MLB hitters you get on this team, the less you're reliant on fewer guys to make up a good hitting team. Like your 3 best hitters are Julio, Cal, and Randy probably. And then You'd hope Luke Raley and even like JP would be just like good all year in different ways. Victor Robles, you get whatever you can get from him. Kind of playing with house money with him. You get 2 more decent bats in there. It's like you can afford for one of your best hitters to miss some time or go on a cold streak and your offense won't fall off a cliff. It's just, again, it's risk variance I've talked about. They're so bad at because they have such a limited budget. They can't just have high-paid veterans on the bench because they're broke. Like, they just simply can't. They can't do that like a lot of other teams do. They can't pay $15 million a year for a few different guys to just be slightly above average Major League Baseball players. On the bench, they just need to hope Tyler Locklear can put together and hope Austin Shenton is fine and hope Dominic Canzone can hit a breaking ball. It's so frustrating because it's a lot of like, oh yeah, like a really good outcome for this player. This would really help the team. But that never really happens. So what else would happen if they actually got those hitters? Ideally, Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore would be on the bench. I've spoken a lot about this. I like Ryan Bliss as a concept. I love Dylan Moore. They do not belong on the opening day starting 9. They simply do not. I think they'd be awesome all year coming off the bench. I think they're they're built like an ideal bench guy. They're fast, can play multiple positions. There, done, easy. Garver would be the full-time backup catcher in that scenario. He would only DH against left-handed pitching if they need him to, and would just play every 4th game or however they want to split the backup catching role. Fine with that. That would also lead to Raley splitting a good amount of time between outfield and first base, which I think is important. I just talked about this earlier. His value is way higher if he plays more outfield than first base, but he should still be available for first base. That's helpful. This is the biggest one. With those acquisitions, Haniger would just be off the team. He should be off the team. He does not belong on this team. Robles should not be penciled in for 600 plate appearances, which is a full season, more or less, if those acquisitions were ever made. I worry a little bit about their outfield being a little too reliant on Victor Robles. I will be honest with you. If they signed an everyday first baseman like a Pete Alonso, then Luke Raley and Robles could split a good amount of time out there. And I would like that. I worry a little bit about Victor Robles, man. I don't know if I'm the low man on him because he was so awesome last year. Especially just vibes-wise. He was amazing. I worry about what he's going to do next season, I'll be honest. It's helpful he's fast and can play all 3 outfield positions. I think that's important. I think that's good to have on the roster, especially he also just seems like an awesome dude personally. I worry about him starting a lot of games like he shouldn't. Like if they sign Anthony Santander, Haniger off the roster, and then you play Santander at a corner outfield spot and DH all year. Takes a little bit of the onus off Robles and even Luke Raley a little bit if you got a first baseman in there. And then Mitch Haniger's off the team. That's a win-win-win right there. And then the last outcome of all of this is all of that happening would shift, ideally, Canzone, Shenton, and Locklear to start the year in AAA, as I think they should. I don't think... It's an ugly bench. It's a very ugly bench. I think I could go on about this team. I don't even know where they go from here, I'll be honest. The next biggest domino to fall in the offseason is Sasaki. Obviously, there's still some decent free agents out there. Like I mentioned, Bregman and Pete Alonso probably are going to get the most money of the rest of the guys available. But Anthony Santander, I think it sounds like he might get a higher AAV, shorter term deal. I would, again, it's not a perfect fit on this Mariners roster, but as I've emphasized, I simply don't care. Anthony Santander is a better hitter than almost everyone on the current Seattle Mariners roster. So that would help. I would love Pete Alonso. I find it hard to believe he's going to go anywhere other than the New York Mets, but I would love Pete Alonso, partly because he plays every day. He's been super stable. I don't know. People talk about the warning signs with him, and then they talk about as good. He's just been your kind of very traditional first base slugger, which has fallen out of vogue. But he also just plays every day. He's been so durable, and I think that is super helpful, especially to a limited team like the Mariners, where like Tyler Locklear, they don't really know what they have. And other than that, at like the corners, it's just it's a tough situation. So getting a first baseman who can hit you the homer every so often, as he's proven to do in his big league career, and then play first base nearly every day, that's a great baseball player. I would pay that baseball player. I'm just different, but the biggest domino to fall is Sasaki still. Sasaki, I think, could open many avenues for this Mariners team, which I will leave this podcast today with an optimistic note. Now, it's optimistic in the context of the Seattle Mariners, so it is inherently less optimistic than if I was a different team with more money to spend. But Sasaki, if he signs with the Mariners, obviously that's amazing. I don't think it's going to happen. Once he signs, there will be a couple teams that will still need pitching. I think the Padres and the Dodgers make the most sense for Sasaki. And other teams also obviously are offering him, like every team should be offering him. But those two teams feel like the favorites. I think if the Padres get him, they'll trade Cease. I think if the Dodgers get him, they'll just keep him. I don't know what they do with the rest of their 8 starting pitchers that are kind of hurt, but we'll see. There will be teams after Sasaki signs. I think that's when like the pitching market might pick up trade-wise, and that's where you could trade a Luis Castillo. Like the Orioles should be in on Sasaki. If they don't get him, call the Mariners. Like, it just makes sense to me. So the optimistic note is that they have all of the resources they had at the start of the offseason because they haven't given anything up. They have a lot of prospects, a lot of position player prospects to trade from, which I still think they should trade from. And they have this pitching staff where it looks like they're willing to trade Luis Castillo for something. I would just hold on to him and pay good players to play baseball for my team instead of trading for them. But again, I'm different. So they're left with a lot of resources. And like I said, next month, pitchers and catchers report. It sucks, but pitchers will tear their UCLs and their labrums and get long-term injuries before spring training even starts. And so if the Mariners manage to hold on to everything they currently have until then, it could just be a very, very late window for them to meaningfully improve the team, and they still could. So I'm not completely out on where they're at. I'm quite disappointed. Like this offseason up until this point has been an F grade for certain. But it's not like it's an F grade because they made a bunch of bad moves. They've made none, which is good and bad. It's mostly bad, but again, they're left with they have so many resources to use right now. And the more time goes on, the closer you get to the season, the more pressure is on them to improve the team. Yes, but it's two sides of the same coin here where, yeah, there's a lot more pressure for them to improve before the season starts. But 29 other teams also have some pressure to improve, especially pitching-wise, before the season begins, and that's where the Mariners could come in and swoop, and Jerry Dipoto could make a patented Jerry trade. So I'm holding out a shred of hope. I don't think they're going to stand pat the whole offseason. I think really Sasaki, whatever happens with that, dominoes will fall after. So we'll just see. And I'm going to cut it here because my throat hurts. But thank you for listening for the first podcast in 2025. Hall of Fame voting is almost done. I think we got 8 days until the results are revealed. I will be putting out a podcast God willing, before that happens, to chat about where Felix is at and where Ichiro is at with all the public ballots known before the results are announced. So look out for that. But again, appreciate you listening. I'm not going to say go and then the M word on this one. I'm just going to wish you a happy new year, a belated happy new year, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you for listening.